In 1892, in the quiet town of Exeter, a young woman named Mercy Brown was dug up from her grave. The townspeople believed she was feeding on the living even after death. So they burned her heart. They thought it would stop the sickness. Over a century later, the town is quiet again. The trees still press close to the roads and the air still feels heavy in the late summer heat. And most people have forgotten what happened here. But some stories don't stay buried. Some wait. Chapter 1. The Roadwork. The machines arrived just after sunrise. By noon, the sound of tearing earth echoed through the trees just outside town. Metal grinding, engines humming, the steady rhythm of progress pushing forward. No one paid much attention at first. Roadwork wasn't unusual in Exeter. The backroads had needed repairs for years. Cracks had split the pavement, tree roots pushing up from beneath like something trying to break through. But this job was different. It cut too close to the old cemetery. The one people didn't visit anymore. They found it by accident. Something wrong in the soil. One of the local workers, Darren, noticed the dirt change color. Darker. Like it had been disturbed long ago and never quite settled right. He shut down his machine and climbed out, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Hey," he called. "You seeing this?" The others gathered, boots crunching over gravel and loose earth. Someone joked about old bones. Another laughed it off. Until Darren's shovel hit something solid. It wasn't buried deep. That was the first unsettling thing. Just beneath the surface, hidden under years of shifting ground, was a narrow wooden structure collapsed inward with age, but still recognizable for what it had once been. Coffin. Too small to be comfortable and too shallow to be right. The wood gave easily since it was rotten and fragile. The lid cracked with a dull, splintering sound that seemed to echo longer than it should have. For a moment no one spoke. No one moved. Then someone muttered, "That's not," and didn't finish the sentence. Inside there wasn't much left. No clean skeleton like you'd expect. No neat arrangement of time and decay. Just fragments, darkened cloth and something else. Darren leaned closer. Too close. He'd later say he didn't know why. Just that something about it felt unfinished. Like the grave had been waiting. "What is that?" someone asked. At the center of the remains, partially preserved by something none of them could explain, was a shape. Small, dark and wrong. A heart. No one laughed after that. By the next morning, Darren called in sick. By the end of the week, 2 more workers followed. The doctor said it was nothing serious. Fatigue. Maybe a seasonal bug. But Darren couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Not just in his body but in the air. At dusk, standing at his kitchen window, he noticed the tree line for the first time. How still it was. How quiet it was. And how, just for a moment, he thought he saw someone standing there watching. He blinked and it was gone. Somewhere, beneath the soil of Exeter, something that had once been disturbed shifted. Chapter 2. The Voice That Carries. By the time Darren Hale stopped answering his phone, the story had already started to spread. Not on the news, just in the quiet ways things travel in small towns, through half-finished conversations, lowered voices, and the kind of looks people give when they don't want to say something out loud. 3 states away, in a dim apartment lit mostly by the glow of a laptop screen, Lena Voss paused mid-edit. She frowned, rewound the audio and played it again. Static. A man's voice, thin, strained, calling into her show. And then something underneath it. Something that hadn't been there the first time she listened. Lena leaned closer, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "That's not right." She dragged the waveform back a few seconds and isolated the background noise. Boosted it. Filtered it. Listen. First it sounded like wind. Soft and directionless. But then a second voice. Faint. Too faint to be part of the call. Not speaking, just there. Lena sat back slowly. She'd been doing this long enough to recognize audio artifacts. Glitches. Compression issues. Weird overlaps from bad connections. This wasn't that. The caller had introduced himself as Darren and said he was calling from Exeter, Rhode Island. Said something felt wrong in his town. At the time, Lena almost didn't include the clip. It had come in late, just before her deadline. The guy sounded exhausted and was rambling. The kind of story that usually led nowhere. But now she hit play again. "I don't think we were supposed to find it," Darren's voice crackled through her speakers. It was too close to the surface. Like it wanted to be found. Static swelled behind him. That same soft, whispering undercurrent. And ever since then I can't sleep. I feel, he hesitated, drained. The word lingered. Lena's jaw tightened slightly. That part hadn't stood out before. But now it did. Now it felt like it mattered. She pulled up her notes, scanning quickly. Fatigue felt by multiple people. Her fingers stilled on the keyboard. No way, she muttered. Lena opened a new tab and started digging through local forums' archived posts, and old news articles barely held together by broken links and outdated formatting. It didn't take long to find something. It never did when something didn't want to stay hidden. 1892 Exeter, Rhode Island. A family falling sick one by one. A town desperate for answers. And a name that kept appearing over and over again. Mercy Brown. Lena clicked into one of the older records. She read quickly at first and then slower. Exhumation. Preservation. Blood. A heart removed and burned. Okay, she said softly, more to herself than anything else. Coincidence. But she didn't believe that. Not really. Lena glanced back at the audio file. At the thin line of static running beneath Darren's voice. Carefully she isolated it again and amplified it just a little more. This time she didn't miss it. A shape in the sound. A rhythm that almost formed words. Not clear. Not human. But close enough to feel like it was trying. Lena's breath caught. Because for just a second it sounded like a woman standing very far away calling to someone. Lena slammed the laptop shut. The sudden silence rang in her ears. She stared at the dark screen, her reflection faintly staring back. Nope, she whispered. But her hand was already reaching for her phone. Because whether she liked it or not, she knew what she was about to do. He was going to Exeter. And somewhere in that town something was already waiting for her to arrive. Chapter 3. The Road into Exeter. Lena Voss didn't sleep on the flight. She told herself it was focus, research, preparation. But the truth was simpler. He kept hearing it. That thin, buried layer of sound from Darren Hale's recording, like something trapped just beneath language, pressing upward without ever fully breaking through. By the time she landed in Rhode Island, the sky had already started to shift into that heavy, washed-out gray that makes everything look older than it is. Rental car keys in hand. Phone already pulled up with directions to Exeter. The GPS said it would take just under an hour. It felt longer. Not because of distance but because of the roads. The highway narrowed the farther she drove. The trees started leaning in closer like they were listening. And the radio couldn't hold a signal for more than a few minutes at a time. Static kept slipping in like something testing the connection. Great, Lena muttered, tapping the dashboard. Even the satellites don't want to commit. The road signs changed slowly. Cities gave way to towns. Towns gave way to names that didn't feel like places so much as memories people forgot to update. Then finally Exeter. There wasn't a sign announcing it in any dramatic way. No welcome arch. No charm. Just a weathered green road marker half hidden by overgrown brush. Like the town preferred not to be noticed. Lena slowed the car. Something about the air shifted as she crossed the invisible line into the town limits. Not physically, but perceptually. Like the world had narrowed. The first thing she noticed was how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet. Not rural quiet. The kind of quiet that feels maintained. Like someone had turned the volume of the world down and forgotten to turn it back up. Her phone buzzed, no signal. Then one bar. Then nothing again. Of course, she sighed. She drove deeper. Past old homes with curtains that didn't move. Past a gas station that looked open but had no attendant. Past people who didn't quite look at her car, like acknowledging it might make it more real. And then she saw a roadside memorial. Simple, with weathered flowers tied to a wooden post. A faded name she couldn't read without slowing down. But what made her break wasn't the memorial. It was what stood just beyond it. The treeline. For a moment she thought she saw someone standing there. Not moving or hiding. Lena blinked and looked again. Nothing. Okay, she whispered. That's just my brain doing horror movie math. She kept driving. But her grip on the steering wheel tightened anyway. Her destination was the town archive building, what little remained of it. Old records, property maps, historical notes. The kind of place where forgotten stories go to collect dust and pretend they never mattered. But as she pulled into the gravel lot, something made her pause before she got out. The air here felt different. Not colder. Not warmer. just heavier. Like it had more history in it than it knew what to do with. And then a faint sound. Faint. Almost imagined. Lena froze, hands still on the door handle. It wasn't wind. It wasn't machinery. It was something like a sigh carried through the trees behind her. Slow and patient. Familiar in a way she couldn't explain. She turned her head. The tree line across the road was empty. Of course it was. Still, she waited a second longer than she needed to before stepping out of the car. Okay, she said quietly, more to steady herself than anything else. Exeter. Don't be weird. She paused. Actually, scratch that. You're already failing that test. She shut the door, and as it clicked closed, somewhere beyond the trees in Exeter, something else seemed to notice she had arrived. And for the first time since she left home, Lena Voss wasn't sure she was the one doing the investigating anymore. Chapter 4. The Keeper of What's Left. The Exeter Town Archive didn't look like it wanted visitors. That was the first thing Lena noticed. The second was that it looked like it hadn't expected any. The building sat slightly back from the road in Exeter, as if even the town had gently nudged it out of the way over time. A low, aging structure with paint that had surrendered years ago and windows that reflected more sky than interior. No sign out front. Just a faded plaque half swallowed by ivy. Lena stepped inside and the air changed immediately. It was cooler, drier, and still. Not peaceful still, preserved still. Like the room had been holding its breath for a very long time and wasn't sure it was allowed to let it out. A bell above the door would have made sense. Something to announce her arrival. But there wasn't one. Just silence. And then there was a voice. Didn't think anyone from outside would come today. Lena turned. Behind the front counter stood a man in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. Gray creeping into his hair like it had started early and never stopped. Reading glasses hanging low, not quite in use. A cardigan that looked permanently one season behind. Calm eyes. Too calm. I'm not here for tourism, Lena said, adjusting her bag. I'm researching a case. The man nodded like he already knew that answer. Like every answer sounded the same in here. You'll want the back room then, he said. He paused, then added almost casually. You're early. Lena frowned. Early for what? He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stepped out from behind the counter and walked toward a narrow hallway lined with filing cabinets that looked older than the building itself. I'm Graham Hale, he said finally. The name hit Lena a half-second too late. Hale. Darren Hale, she asked. Graham didn't stop walking. That would be my nephew. That changed the temperature of the room in a way Lena couldn't explain. I spoke to him, she said carefully. On my show. He said there was something wrong in town. Graham gave a small nod. Not surprised or concerned. Just acknowledging. He wasn't wrong, he said. They reached a heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. Graham stopped there and rested his hand on the handle. But he wasn't the first, he added quietly. Lena's eyes narrowed. First. Graham finally looked at her directly. And for the first time the calmness in him felt less like indifference and more like restraint. The archives exist for a reason, he said. A faint, tired exhale. Most people assume it's to remember things. He opened the door. Sometimes it's to make sure they don't get out again. The room beyond was smaller than Lena expected. Rows of old storage boxes. Bundles of brittle paper tied in twine. Microfiche drawers. Handwritten ledgers that looked like they belonged to a different century entirely. And on the far wall, a corkboard covered in pinned notes, maps, photographs connected by strings. This is about Mercy Brown, she said. Not a question anymore. At the mention of the name, Graham didn't react outwardly. But something in the room seemed to tighten anyway. She was part of it, Graham said simply. He moved to the corkboard. Tapped a faded newspaper clipping with his finger. Not the beginning. Not the end. Just the point where people noticed enough to get scared. Lena followed his gaze. The clipping showed a crude illustration of a grave being opened. Old handwriting underneath. Exeter, 1892. I don't understand, Lena said. They thought she was a vampire. That was superstition. Medical misunderstanding. Tuberculosis explanations exist now. They always exist later, Graham interrupted gently. He pulled out a folder from a lower shelf and handed it to her. Inside were handwritten notes, old interview transcripts, town records, and names repeating in patterns that made no immediate sense until you looked long enough. People think the story ended with fire, he said. Burning. Ritual. Closure. Lena's eyes scanned the pages. Her focus snagged on something in the margins. Repeated phrases. Same structure. Different centuries. They were wrong, Graham continued. He leaned against the table now. Tired in a way that felt older than him. It didn't end. It adapted. A faint sound crept into the room then. So subtle Lena almost dismissed it. Like paper shifting. Or breath through a vent. Graham heard it too, and for the first time his expression changed just slightly. Concern and recognition crossed his face. Lena looked up. Do you hear that? Graham didn't answer right away. Instead he looked toward the hallway behind them. The one they had just walked through. You're not early, he said quietly. Lena frowned. You already said. No, he interrupted and paused while he swallowed. I said you were early. He met her eyes again, and this time the calm was gone. You're not, he said. Then he added softly, you're late. The air in the archive seemed to shift just slightly. Like something had adjusted its attention. And somewhere deep in the building of Exeter, something that had been quiet for a very long time, was no longer interested in staying that way. Chapter 5. The pattern beneath the names. The silence in the archive didn't last. It never did in places like this. It just waited for something to disturb it again. Graham Hale closed the door behind them. Not gently. Not dramatically. Just firmly enough that Lena noticed it wasn't for privacy. It was for containment. Inside the room of Exeter the air felt even heavier now. Like the walls had remembered she was there. Or worse, like they had been waiting for it. Lena set the folder down carefully on the table. You said there's a pattern, she said. Not just a story. Not superstition. A pattern. Graham didn't answer immediately. Instead he walked to the corkboard again. Ran a finger along a line of connected pins. Not random. Yes, he said finally. There's a pattern. And it doesn't start with Mercy Brown. That made Lena look up. He tapped a second cluster of documents. Older and faded. Some barely readable. People like to treat her case like it was the origin, Graham said. Like everything begins with panic and ends with fire. His mouth tightened slightly. But something was already happening before her grave was opened. He turned and looked at Lena directly now. Deaths like hers don't appear in isolation. Lena leaned forward slightly. What kind of deaths? Graham pulled out a sheet and laid it flat. Handwritten notes. Old town records. Names. Dates. Symptoms. Fatigue, he said. Slow recovery from illness. Family clusters. Entire households declining together. He tapped the page lightly. Doctors used to call it consumption. Later tuberculosis. But look at the records carefully. Lena scanned them. At first it looked like scattered tragedy. But then it wasn't scattered anymore. The same pattern repeats, Graham continued. Every time. He flipped to another page. Then another. Someone gets sick first, he said. Not always the same age. Not always the same role in the family. His voice lowered slightly. But always the same outcome. Lena frowned. More illness spreading through close contact? Graham shook his head once. No. He stepped closer to the table and tapped a specific line. They don't recover, he said. They weaken. Slowly. Consistently. And then they start seeing her. Lena's pen stilled. Seeing who? Graham didn't say the name immediately. He didn't need to. Mercy Brown. She appears at the edge of things first, he said. Tree lines. Window reflections. Places people assume are tricks of the eye. Lena's voice dropped slightly. Hallucinations. Reports said that too, Graham replied. But the reports are consistent across decades. He leaned back slightly. That's the part people don't notice. He gestured to the board again. Different families. Different eras. Same descriptions. Someone is always outside, he said. Watching. Not moving closer. Not leaving. And the people who see her always get worse afterward. The archive felt colder now. Lena realized she hadn't moved in several seconds. So you're saying, she said slowly, this is some kind of shared delusion? A cultural memory that gets passed down. Graham exhaled, not impatient, just tired. I'm saying, he replied, that something in this town behaves like it remembers being feared. Lena looked down at the folder again. At the records. At the names. At the repetition. It always escalates, Graham continued. His voice softened slightly. As if it's learning what people believe about it. That landed differently. Heavier. Lena looked up. Learning. Graham nodded once. 1892 was not the beginning, he said again. Just the moment the town decided it had a name. He walked to the far side of the room, picked up a small worn notebook from a shelf and placed it gently on the table. This is what I couldn't fit on the board, he said. Lena opened it. Inside were more recent entries. Neater handwriting. More detailed. And one name repeated far more often than the others, Darren Hale. Her stomach tightened slightly. Graham watched her reaction carefully. Not surprised or uncertain. Just confirming she understood the direction of things now. He found the grave, Graham said quietly. It was never meant to be disturbed. Lena looked up sharply. And now he's sick. A small nod. Then Graham added, and now you're here. That was the moment the room changed again. Not visibly. Not loudly. Just enough that Lena felt it in her chest. Like something outside the building had shifted its attention inward. She looked toward the hallway. The door they had come through. What happens next? She asked. Graham didn't answer right away. Instead he looked at the wall of names one more time. At all the patterns. All the repeats. All the quiet inevitability. Then very softly, it finishes the cycle. And then it starts looking for the next one. The silence that followed felt less like absence and more like anticipation. Somewhere in the distance of Exeter, something that had been watching for a very long time, seemed to decide it was finally time to be noticed again. Chapter 6. The Weight of Breath. Darren Hale stopped checking the mirror after the third night. Not because he didn't want to see but because he already knew what it would show. His apartment in Exeter had started to feel smaller, not physically. Just present differently. Like the walls had moved closer when he wasn't looking. He told himself it was stress. Worksite exposure. Heat exhaustion. Anything that made sense. Anything that didn't require a second explanation. But then came the exhaustion that didn't behave like exhaustion. The kind that didn't improve with sleep. Darren sat on the edge of his bed now, elbows on his knees. Breathing slow. Measured. Like he was trying not to waste it. That was the strangest part. The awareness of it. Every breath felt accounted for. Like something was quietly tracking the balance. He rubbed his hands over his face. Okay, he whispered to the empty room. This is just panic. This is. He stopped because he heard something. Not inside the room. Not outside the window. A faint sound that didn't belong to anything with a clear source. Like wind trying to remember language. Darren stood slowly and walked to the window. The street outside was still. Too still. No cars passing or dogs barking. Even the distant hum of the world felt muted. And then he saw it. At the edge of the trees beyond the road. Not fully formed but not fully absent. Just, there in the way shadows sometimes become almost human when you don't want them to. A figure. Darren's breath caught immediately. No, he said softly. He blinked and it didn't move. He swallowed and looked away for half a second. Looked back and it was still there. Closer now. Not walking. Not approaching. Just being closer. Like distance didn't matter anymore. Darren stepped back from the window. His heart was doing something he didn't like. He forced himself to breathe slower. But something about the rhythm felt wrong. Like even his breathing wasn't fully his anymore. A knock came at the door and Darren froze. It wasn't loud. Just one soft tap. He didn't move. Another knock. Same place. Same pressure. Darren, a voice called. Familiar. Too familiar. His throat tightened. He knew that voice. But his brain refused to place it cleanly. Like the memory was being held just out of reach. Darren opened the door. He stepped back slowly. No, he whispered. The knock came again but this time it didn't sound like wood. Sounded like something remembering how doors work. Darren turned away from it. Walked into the kitchen and turned the faucet on. He let water run. Anything to break the silence. But even the water didn't feel normal. Sounded thin. Like it was coming from farther away than it should. His vision blurred slightly at the edges. He gripped the counter. Okay, he said again, quieter now. I'm sick. That's all this is. I'm just tired. The word didn't feel right when he said it. From the other room, another knock. Still there. Still waiting. Darren didn't answer. But something in him realized something important. It wasn't trying to get in. It already had access. He walked back toward the hallway slowly. Each step heavier than the last. Like gravity was negotiating differently with him now. At the bedroom doorway he stopped. The window was still visible from here. And the figure outside the trees was gone. Relief should have come. But it didn't. Because now the absence felt like confirmation. Not safety. Darren's breathing hitched slightly. He looked down at his hands. They felt colder than they should. Then he heard a whisper. Right behind him. Not spoken. Not formed. But understood. And Darren Hale finally realized the worst part wasn't seeing something outside. It was realizing it no longer needed to stay there. Back in the quiet archive of Exeter, something on Graham's wall seemed for the briefest moment to look less like a pattern and more like a map. Chapter 7. The Thing That Notices You Back. Lena didn't realize she was holding her breath until Graham spoke again. It was only a single word. But it landed like something heavier than language. Darren, Graham said quietly. Lena turned toward him immediately. He's getting worse. Not a question. A conclusion. Graham nodded once. Yes, he said. The archive in Exeter seemed quieter now than it had been before. Not emptier. Just attentive. Lena stepped closer to the table, Darren's notebook still open between them. Her fingers hovered over the page. Then this isn't just illness, she said. It's progression. Graham didn't correct her. That alone was answer enough. Lena flipped back through the pages again. Patterns. Names. Dates. Clusters of decline. All circling the same shape. The same story told in different handwriting across centuries. And then she saw it. A margin note she hadn't noticed before. Smaller handwriting. Different ink. Older than the rest of the entry it sat beside. It learns faster when it is named. Lena frowned. What does that mean? Graham's expression tightened slightly. It means, he said carefully, that once the town gave it meaning, it started responding to meaning. Lena looked up sharply. You're saying belief is part of it? Graham nodded once. Not belief, he corrected. Attention. That word felt worse. Somehow more active. Lena leaned back slightly, trying to process it. So the more people talk about it, the more it adapts? Graham didn't answer immediately. Instead he walked toward the corkboard again and ran his hand slowly along the connected threads. Think of it less like a story, he said. And more like something that notices when it's being observed. Lena stared at him. Like it's aware. It has always been aware, Graham answered. That settled in the room like dust that refuses to move. Lena looked back down at Darren's notes. At the repetition and structure. At the way everything seemed to spiral toward the same point. She appeared to him, Lena said softly. Not a question anymore. A confirmation of the direction things were going. That's how it starts, he said. Always the same first step. Lena's voice lowered. And the second? Graham hesitated. Distance collapses, he said. Lena frowned. What does that mean? Graham turned slightly toward her, his voice quieter now. More precise. It stops staying at the edge of things and starts appearing where it's already been seen. Lena's stomach tightened. That's not how perception works, she said instinctively. Graham gave a small, tired exhale. It isn't supposed to, he agreed. Lena glanced toward the hallway behind them. The one leading back to the front of the archive. For a moment she thought she heard something. Not a sound exactly. More like the idea of movement. She turned her head slightly. Do you have security cameras here? She asked. Graham blinked, then slowly shook his head. No, he said. We stopped using them. That didn't make Lena feel better. Not even a little. She stepped away from the table. I need to see where Darren was when he found the grave, she said. Exact location. Not just records. Graham studied her for a moment, then nodded. There's a map room, he said. But Lena. She looked at him. He hesitated, then chose his words carefully. If you go deeper into this, he said, you will stop being just an observer of it. You will become part of its pattern. Lena held his gaze, then quietly said, I already am. That landed harder than she expected. Graham didn't argue. He just turned toward the hallway. Then you should see where it begins to repeat, he said. And as they moved deeper into the archive, the feeling that the building wasn't just holding records anymore started. It was tracking what they chose to look at. And somewhere beyond the walls of Exeter, something that had once been content to watch from a distance was no longer interested in staying at the edge. Chapter 8. The Shape of Repetition. The map room wasn't what Lena expected. Nothing in the archive of Exeter ever seemed to match expectations. That was becoming a pattern of its own. It was smaller than the records room and had a lower ceiling and thicker air. The kind of space that felt like it had been designed before anyone fully understood what it would be used for. Old wooden tables sat in the center, scarred with pencil marks that had never been fully erased. The walls were lined with oversized maps, some modern, most not. And all of them layered. Not replaced. Like time itself had been traced again and again in the same place. Lena stepped inside slowly. Her eyes adjusted, scanning immediately. Why are there so many versions of the same area? She asked. Graham didn't answer right away. He moved to the nearest wall and pulled a thin cloth away from one section of map. This is what people miss, he said quietly. Underneath the top layer was another map. Older with faded ink. Hand-drawn boundaries that didn't match modern roads at all. Lena leaned closer. That's Exeter, she said. Then paused. Sort of. Graham nodded. It's Exeter as it was understood, he said. He peeled back another corner carefully. Another map beneath it. Then another. Then another. Layered like sediment. Like memory. Like something refusing to be fully replaced. Lena's focus sharpened. Each map showed something similar but not identical. Roads shifted slightly. Forests expanded or shrank. Structures appeared, then disappeared in later versions. This doesn't make sense, she said. Why redraw the same region over and over like this? Graham stepped closer to the center table and placed a finger on a pinned point. Because something keeps happening in the same places, he said. Lena looked up. What kind of something? Graham didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled out a transparent overlay sheet and laid it over one of the maps. Then another and aligned it carefully. At first it looked like nothing changed, just stacked geography. Then Lena saw it. The patterns weren't random. They were clusters. Points that repeated across every layer. Different centuries. Different roads. Same positions. Her breath slowed slightly. Those are all the same locations, she said. Graham nodded once. Yes. Lena traced one of the clusters with her eyes. Is that where Darren? Yes, Graham cut her off. Another cluster. Slightly north. Older notation. Different handwriting. And that one. Graham's voice softened. That is where the first recorded sickness cluster began. Lena's stomach tightened. She stepped closer to the table. Studied the overlapping sheets. The alignment wasn't perfect. But it didn't need to be. The pattern was still there. Clear enough that ignoring it felt like denial. This isn't just historical, she said quietly. No, Graham replied. He paused, then he added, it's spatial. Lena frowned slightly. Spatial how? Graham hesitated. Then pointed to the center of the cluster pattern. Every incident, he said, every reported sighting, every illness event tied to the old records occurs within reach of the same radius. Lena stared at him. Reach of what? Graham didn't answer immediately. Instead he turned toward another wall. A smaller map. Older than the rest. Almost crude in design. He placed his hand on it. People used to think it was a grave, he said. Or a curse. He looked back at Lena. But it behaves more like an anchor. The word settled heavily in the room. Lena stepped closer again. Her voice lowered. An anchor to what? Graham didn't look away this time. To a place where something was made real, he said. And never fully stopped being real. Silence again. But this one felt different. Like the maps weren't just showing geography anymore. Like they were showing attention. Lena looked down at the layered sheets again. At the repeating points, the clusters and the overlaps. And then she noticed something she hadn't before. One of the clusters, the newest one, was not centered on an old event. It was centered on something active. She looked up sharply. That one wasn't there before. Graham followed her gaze. And for the first time since she arrived, his expression changed. Not fear. Not surprise. Something worse. Recognition turning into confirmation. That, he said quietly, is new. Then Lena asked, "What's new?" Graham didn't answer immediately. Instead he looked toward the ceiling of the map room. Like he was listening for something that wasn't sound. Finally he said, "It's expanding." The air in the room seemed to tighten slightly. Not enough to feel. Enough to notice you were noticing it. Lena stepped back from the table. Expanding into what? Graham's voice dropped lower. Almost reluctant now. Toward us. And somewhere in the layered geography of Exeter, the newest point on the map didn't look like a location anymore. It looked like a direction. Chapter 9. The center of it. Lena didn't step back far enough. No matter where she moved in the map room, the feeling stayed with her, like distance wasn't doing what it was supposed to anymore. She stared at the newest cluster again. At the way it didn't sit neatly in the past like the others. At the way it spread. Toward us, she repeated quietly. Graham didn't correct her. Didn't soften it. Yes. The word settled into the room like something final. Lena looked down at the map. Then back up at him. "Where are we?" she asked. Graham held her gaze. And for the first time since she'd met him, there was no hesitation at all. Inside it. The air shifted. Not dramatically. Not violently. Just enough that Lena felt it in her chest. Like the room had quietly agreed with him. "No," she said instinctively, shaking her head. "That doesn't make sense. We just got here. This started with Darren, not." "It didn't start with Darren," Graham said gently. "That again." Lena's frustration flickered. "Then what is it?" she pressed. "You keep circling it like it's a thing, not a story. Not a disease. Not even a haunting. So what is it?" Graham exhaled slowly. Like he had been holding this explanation back for longer than she realized. "It's not one thing," he said. He stepped closer to the map. Rested his hand lightly against the layered sheets. "It's a convergence." Lena frowned. "Of what?" Graham's eyes flicked briefly to the name pinned at the center of one of the older clusters, then back to her. "Fear," he said. "A pattern of illness people couldn't explain. A need to give that pattern a face." His voice dropped slightly. And the moment they did, something answered. The room felt smaller. Lena shook her head again, but slower now. Less certain. "You're saying they created it?" Graham tilted his head slightly. "No," he said. "Not created. They anchored it." That word again. Heavier this time. Lena's voice lowered without her meaning it to. "What does that actually mean?" Graham didn't look at her when he answered. "It means something was already there," he said. "Something undefined. Unnoticed. Not fully formed." His fingers traced one of the overlapping points on the map. And when enough people feared it the same way, he tapped the center. They gave it shape. Lena felt her heartbeat pick up slightly. "And Mercy Brown?" she asked. Graham's jaw tightened just a fraction. "She became the most recognizable version of that shape," he said. "Not because she was the cause. Because she was the clearest reflection of what they believed. That landed harder than anything else." Lena looked back at the map. At the layers. At the repetition. So burning her heart didn't stop it, she said. Graham shook his head once. "No," he said. "It confirmed it." The room went still again. Lena felt something twist in her stomach. "That doesn't make any sense," she whispered. "It doesn't have to," Graham replied quietly. "It just has to be believed." And then something changed. Not in the conversation. Not in the map. In the room. Lena froze. "Did you hear that?" Graham didn't answer. But his posture shifted just slightly. There was again. That almost sound. That not quite their presence. Like something brushing against the edges of perception. Lena turned slowly. Scanning the walls. The doorway. The narrow space between the shelves. Nothing. And then she saw it. Not fully. Not clearly. Just a reflection in the glass covering one of the older maps. A shape that didn't match the room behind her. Standing too close. Lena's breath caught sharply. "Graham," she whispered. He didn't move. Didn't turn. "I know," he said quietly. The reflection shifted. Not stepping. Not walking. Like focus adjusting on something that had been there the entire time. Lena's voice trembled just slightly. That's not outside. Graham's answer came immediately. No. It isn't. The air felt thinner now. Harder to pull in. Lena forced herself to breathe. But the rhythm felt wrong again. Like something was quietly interfering with it. Her eyes stayed locked on the reflection. It wasn't detailed. Didn't need to be. Figure still watching. And then it tilted its head just slightly. Like it had finally recognized her. Lena stumbled back. The movement breaking the angle of the reflection. When she looked again, it was gone. But the feeling didn't leave. Because now it wasn't in the glass, it was in the room. Graham stepped forward slowly. Not toward it, toward Lena. You see it now, he said. Not a question. Lena swallowed hard. Yeah. What does that mean? Graham didn't soften it. Didn't hesitate. It means, he said quietly, it knows where you are. And somewhere within the overlapping layered center of Exeter, the pattern didn't just feel like something repeating anymore. Felt like something closing. Chapter 10. When the door stopped smattering. Darren Hale hadn't opened the door. Not after the voice or the knocking. Not after realizing the sound didn't belong to anything that needed permission to enter. And yet he wasn't alone. The apartment in Exeter had gone quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until you start filling it with your own thoughts just to make it stop. Darren sat on the floor now with his back against the kitchen cabinets. He didn't remember sitting down. Didn't remember deciding to. Time had started doing something strange. Not skipping or stopping. Just loosening. His phone lay a few feet away on the counter. Screen dark and battery drained faster than it should have. Like something had been using it without him noticing. He didn't want to check it. Didn't want to see missed calls. Didn't want to hear his own voice recorded back at him sounding thinner and weaker. Less like something fully alive. I'm fine, he said aloud. The words landed wrong. Not because they weren't true. But because something in the room didn't agree. A soft sound answered him. Not a voice. That same pressure behind sound that felt like it was waiting for the right shape to form. Darren squeezed his eyes shut. Stop, he whispered. Silence. Then there was a shift. He felt it before he saw it. The way the air changes when someone steps closer to you even if you can't hear their footsteps. Even if you should be alone. Darren's eyes opened slowly. The kitchen looked the same. He looked around at the counter, the sink, the window. He froze. Because the reflection in his window wasn't right. The angle showed part of the room behind him. The hallway, the doorway leading to his bedroom and something standing in it. Darren didn't turn around. His breathing slowed instinctively. Not to calm himself. But like some part of him understood that sudden movement would make it worse. The reflection didn't move either. Didn't need to. It was already inside. You're not real, Darren said. His voice barely made it out. The thing in the reflection didn't react. Didn't blink. Didn't shift. Just watched. Darren swallowed hard. His throat felt too dry. You're not real, he said again. This time something changed. Not in the room but in the reflection. The figure tilted its head just slightly. The same way Lena had seen. Recognition. Darren's breath hitched. No, he whispered. And then it moved. Not closer. But clearer. Details didn't appear all at once. They didn't need to. A suggestion of a face. Hollowed where it shouldn't be. Still where it should breathe. And something wrong at the center of its chest. Darren's eyes locked on that point without meaning to. A darkened shape collapsed inward. Like something had been taken. His stomach dropped. The heart, he breathed. The figure didn't respond. But something in the room did. That almost sound again. But closer now. Right behind him. Darren's body tensed. Because the reflection was still showing it in the doorway. A whisper brushed the edge of his ear. Not formed. Not spoken. But understood. You saw me. Darren flinched violently, scrambling forward, knocking into the counter. The sudden movement broke the angle of the reflection. He spun around. Nothing. The hallway was empty. But the feeling didn't leave. Because now it wasn't about where it was. It was about where it wasn't. Darren stumbled back, hitting the wall. His breathing came faster now. Too fast. And for the first time he realized something worse than seeing it. Worse than hearing it. Worse than feeling it in the room. It wasn't waiting anymore. It was responding. Miles away in the map room of Exeter, a new point on the layered maps didn't just expand. It deepened. Chapter 11. Where it was opened. Graham didn't argue. That was the first thing that unsettled Lena. When she said she wanted to see the site, the exact place where Darren had uncovered the grave, there was no hesitation. No warning this time. No attempt to slow her down. Just a quiet nod. Then we should go now, he said. The drive was shorter than Lena expected. Or maybe it only felt that way because something about the town of Exeter made distance unreliable. The roads narrowed again. Trees thickened. Branches leaned overhead like they were trying to close the sky. Lena kept glancing at the GPS. The route didn't change. But the time kept flickering. Does it always feel like this? She asked. Graham kept his eyes on the road. Yes. Most people just don't stay long enough to notice. That didn't help. They turned onto a dirt path barely wide enough for the car. The tires crunched over loose stone and old leaves. Then they stopped. There, Graham said. At first Lena didn't see it. Just trees, brush and uneven ground. Then her eyes adjusted and found a break in the earth. Not dramatic or obvious. Just wrong. Like the land had been opened and closed again without fully agreeing to it. Lena stepped out of the car slowly. The air felt heavier here. Then, like breathing required just a little more effort than it should. That's where they were digging, Graham said, nodding toward the disturbed ground. Lena moved closer. Each step felt slightly off. Not unstable. Just delayed. Like the ground wasn't entirely in sync with her movement. She stopped at the edge of the break and looked down. The soil was darker there. Packed tighter. And in the center there was a shallow depression. Her stomach turned slightly. That's it, she asked quietly. Graham stepped up beside her. That's enough, he said. Lena crouched slightly to study it, trying to match what she was seeing to what she knew from the story of Mercy Brown. They thought this would stop it, she murmured. Burning the heart. Destroying the body. Graham's voice came low. They thought they were removing the cause. They were standing in the center of it. That feeling again. Lena straightened slowly. The anchor, she said. Graham nodded. Yes. Silence settled over the clearing. Not peaceful or neutral. Lena glanced toward the surrounding trees at the line where the forest thickened. Her breath slowed slightly. This is where it started again, she said. Graham didn't correct her this time. Yes. The word barely left his mouth before Lena felt it a shift. Like stepping into a room where someone had just been speaking and stopping the moment you entered. Her body tensed. Graham, she whispered. I know, he said. The trees were still too still. Then movement at the edge of the clearing. Lena's eyes snapped to it. It wasn't fully visible or fully hidden. A figure standing exactly where the tree line began. Watching. Her breath caught. It's here, she said. Graham didn't move and didn't look surprised. No, he said quietly. It's always here. The figure didn't step forward. Didn't need to. Lena's heart pounded in her chest. Her instincts screamed at her to back away. To leave. To break the line of sight. But she didn't. Because something in her understood the same way Darren had that it wasn't about distance anymore. The figure shifted. Not closer or clearer. Lena's breath hitched. That's not possible, she whispered. Graham's voice stayed steady. It doesn't follow distance, he said. The figure tilted its head. Recognition again. Lena felt it hit her like a physical thing. And suddenly she knew. Not logically or intellectually. But instinctively. It wasn't just watching her. It was placing her inside the pattern. A sharp pressure built in her chest and her breathing stuttered. Graham, she gasped. I know, he said again. But this time there was urgency in it. Don't focus on it, he added quickly. Don't give it a clearer shape. Too late. Lena's eyes were already locked. And for a split second she saw more. Not detail or clarity. But absence. Where something should have been. At the center of its chest, a hollow. Her vision blurred and the world tilted slightly. And then the figure was gone. Just gone. Like it had never been there. Lena stumbled back, catching herself. Her breathing uneven now. It disappeared, she said. Graham shook his head slowly. No, he said. It moved. Lena's stomach dropped. Where? Graham didn't answer immediately because he didn't need to. The answer wasn't in the clearing anymore. It wasn't at the tree line. It wasn't at the edge. Lena felt it before she understood it. That same shift. That same presence. Closer now. Not in front of her and not behind her. Somewhere worse. Graham's voice dropped to almost nothing. It doesn't stay where you last saw it. It stays where you understand it. And standing in the broken earth of Exeter, Lena Voss realized she understood it just enough now for it to never need the distance again. Chapter 12. The Same Shape of Fear. Lena didn't remember getting back into the car. Didn't remember the drive. Didn't remember how long it took to return to town. Only that by the time they reached the edge of Exeter again something had changed. The world felt thinner. Like whatever separated her from it had worn down just enough to notice. Graham didn't speak as he parked outside the small apartment complex. "He's inside," he said finally. Lena's stomach tightened. "You're sure?" Graham gave her a look. "He didn't leave," he said. That wasn't comforting. They moved quickly up the stairs and down the narrow hallway. The door to Darren's apartment was already open. Lena stopped just short of it. "You said he wouldn't open the door," she said. Graham didn't answer. Something inside had. The air hit her first. Not a smell. Just wrong. Like the room had been sealed too long with something that didn't breathe. "Darren," Lena called. No answer. They stepped inside. The apartment was dim. Curtains drawn and lights off. But not empty. Darren sat on the floor where the kitchen met the living room. Exactly where he had been before. Only now he was facing the door. Waiting. Relief hit Lena first. "Darren," she said, stepping forward. His eyes lifted to meet hers and the relief vanished just as fast. He didn't look sick or injured, just thinned. Like something essential had been stretched too far inside him. "You see it too," Darren said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," she said quietly. A beat passed between them. Recognition. Not of each other. Of the same thing. Darren let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Good," he said. The word landed wrong. Lena frowned slightly. "Good," she repeated. Darren nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. His voice was steady. "Because that means I'm not the only one it's adjusting to." Lena's chest tightened. "Adjusting?" she asked. Darren's gaze flicked briefly past her. To the space just over her shoulder, then back. "It gets clearer," he said. "Every time you notice it." Lena didn't turn around. He didn't need to. Because she already felt it. That subtle shift closer. Graham stepped in then, positioning himself just slightly between them. "How long?" he asked Darren. Darren didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted again. Tracking something neither of them could fully see. "I don't know," he said finally. It stopped feeling like time. That matched too well. Lena swallowed hard. "It was at the site," she said. "In the tree line." "I know," Darren cut in softly. Lena blinked. "You know." Darren nodded. "I didn't see that part," he said. "But I felt when you did." Silence dropped hard into the room. Lena's pulse spiked. "That's not possible," she said. Graham didn't correct her or reassure her because they were past that now. Darren's expression didn't change. "It is if it's not following us," he said. Lena's breath caught. "Then what is it doing?" Darren's eyes flicked again, this time to the empty space beside him. Then back to her. "Connecting," he said. The word sat heavy and wrong. Because suddenly everything lined up. The pattern. The timing. The way it had reacted when she recognized it. The way Darren had progressed faster. Because he had seen it first. "No," Lena whispered. Darren's voice dropped lower. "It doesn't need distance anymore," he said. "It needs us." The air shifted again. Stronger this time. Both of them felt it simultaneously. Lena's head snapped slightly to the side. Darren's did the same. Because for just a second they both saw it. Not fully. Not completely. But enough. Standing between them. The same hollow at its center. The same stillness. The same recognition. Lena's breath stuttered. Darren didn't move. "It's closer when we're together," Lena whispered. Darren nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "Or maybe." His voice thinned slightly. "It's more complete." Graham stepped forward sharply. "That's enough," he said. The presence shifted instantly. Not gone. But receding. Like something pulling back just out of reach. Watching. Waiting. Lena's heart pounded. What happens when it's complete? She asked. Graham didn't answer right away. For the first time he hesitated. And that was worse than anything he could have said. Chapter 13. What they left behind. No one moved. Even the air in the apartment felt like it was holding still, waiting for something to finally be said out loud. Graham exhaled slowly. You're both far enough into it now, he said, that lying would be pointless. Lena crossed her arms slightly, more to steady herself than anything else. Then don't, she said. Darren didn't speak. His eyes had drifted again, tracking something neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Graham nodded once. What they found in 1892, he began, was never just a body. Lena's stomach tightened. The story everyone knows, the illness, the deaths, the fear, it's all real, he continued. But the part they misunderstood was what they were trying to fix. He looked directly at Lena now. When they exhumed Mercy Brown, they believed she was the cause. Darren let out a quiet breath. They burned the heart, he said. Graham nodded. Yes. Silence stretched. And that should have ended it, Lena said. Graham's expression didn't change. It didn't, he said simply. Because it wasn't her. That landed heavy. Lena frowned. Then what was it? Graham hesitated again. Just for a second. Then he answered, a process. Darren's eyes sharpened slightly. What kind of process? Graham's gaze shifted between them. The kind that needs more than one person, he said. Lena's pulse spiked. No, she said quietly. Graham didn't stop. It starts with one, he continued. Someone who sees it first. Someone who recognizes it enough to give it shape. Darren. Lena felt it immediately. It spreads, Graham said. Not randomly. Not like an infection. More like alignment. Lena's throat went dry. You mean it chooses? She asked. Graham shook his head. No, he said. It matches. That was worse. Darren shifted slightly against the wall. And when it matches? He asked. Graham's voice dropped lower. It builds. The room felt smaller. Heart stopped being the focus because they misunderstood what was missing, Graham continued. They thought removing hers would end it. His eyes flicked briefly unintentionally to Darren's chest. But the absence didn't start with her, he said. Lena's breath hitched. The hollow you're seeing? Graham asked quietly. Neither of them answered. They didn't need to. That's not damage, he said. It's space. A cold, creeping feeling slid down Lena's spine. For what? She whispered. Graham finally looked away. For what's being assembled. Silence crushed the room. Darren let out a weak, humorless laugh. Assembled, he repeated. You keep using words like that. Graham didn't react. Because they're accurate, he said. Lena shook her head slightly. No, she said. No, you're saying this like it's mechanical. Like it's predictable. Graham looked back at her. It is, he said. Because it's happened before. Her stomach dropped. Mercy, she said. Graham nodded once. They didn't stop it, he said. They interrupted it. Darren's breathing slowed. And now? He asked. Graham didn't hesitate this time. Now it's finishing. Lena felt that pressure again. Stronger. Positive. What happens when it's finished? She asked. Graham held her gaze. And for the first time there was something like regret in it. It doesn't need to be seen anymore, he said. Because it won't be separate. The room shifted. Not physically, but perceptually. Like something had just moved from outside the edges of reality to inside it. Darren's voice came quieter now. How many? He asked. Graham didn't answer right away. At least 2, he said. Lena's breath caught. Darren closed his eyes briefly. That's why it got stronger, Lena whispered. When we were together. Graham nodded. Yes. It's not following you, he said. The realization hit all over again. It's using you. The air thickened. That presence pressed closer. Not hidden anymore. Not distant. Just waiting. Lena's voice dropped. Can we stop it? Graham didn't answer immediately. And that silence was the closest thing to an answer they'd gotten. Chapter 14. Where it finishes. No, Lena said. The word came out sharper than she expected. More certainly. Graham looked at her. Darren didn't. Because Darren already knew what she was going to say. We're not guessing, Lena continued. "We're not waiting for it to finish whatever this is." Her eyes locked onto Graham. "It started there," she said. "It anchors there. That's the only place we have any chance of understanding it. Or stopping it." Silence stretched. Then Darren pushed himself to his feet. Unsteady but determined. "She's right," he said. Graham studied both of them. Long enough to make it clear he didn't like this. Not even a little. "If we go back," Graham said, "you don't look at it." Lena almost laughed. "That ship sailed," she said. Graham didn't smile. "Then you don't understand it," he corrected. That hit differently. The drive back to the clearing felt longer this time. Not because the road had changed, but because something else had. The car felt smaller. The space tighter. And every so often Lena caught Darren glancing toward her. Not suspicious. Not afraid. Just checking. Like he needed to confirm she was still there. She understood because she was doing the same thing. When they stepped out into the clearing again in Exeter, the air felt different. Not heavier. Fuller. Like something had been waiting and now didn't have to anymore. The disturbed ground sat exactly as before. So, quiet. Wrong. But now it didn't feel like an opening. Felt like a center. Graham stopped just short of it. "This is where they made the mistake," he said. Lena stepped forward anyway. "They thought removing something would fix it," she said. Graham nodded. "Yes." Darren moved beside her. "So we don't remove anything," he said. Lena glanced at him. "Then what do we do?" No one answered. Because the clearing already had. The shift hit all three of them at once. Stronger than before. Immediate. Like stepping into a space that was already occupied and being noticed for it. Lena's breath caught. "It's here," she said. Graham's voice came low. "It never left." The tree line darkened. Not visually but perceptually. Like the edges of the world had softened just enough to let something step through. And then it did. The figure emerged. Not from the trees but from the space between them. Lena's chest tightened violently. Closer than before. Clearer than before. And wrong in ways her mind couldn't fully hold on to. Darren exhaled slowly. "It's not waiting anymore," he said. Graham's voice sharpened. "Don't focus on it." Too late. Lena felt it. That pull. That instinct to complete the shape. To understand it. And suddenly she saw it differently. Not as a figure. As a gap. A space that didn't belong. A place where something should exist but didn't. Her breath steadied. "It's not whole," she said. Darren turned slightly toward her. "No," he said quietly. Lena's eyes didn't leave it. "It needs us to define it," she continued. "To give it shape. To fill in what's missing." Graham didn't interrupt because she was right. Lena took a slow step forward. The pressure increased instantly. But she didn't stop. "What if we don't?" she said. The air shifted sharply. Darren's head snapped toward her. "What?" Lena swallowed. "What if we stop trying to understand it?" she said. "Stop trying to see it clearly. Stop giving it structure." Graham's eyes widened slightly. Not in fear but in recognition. "You collapse it," he said. Lena nodded slowly. "It's only real because we keep completing it," she said. The figure flickered just slightly. Like a signal losing strength. Darren stared at it. "So we don't look at it," he said. Lena shook her head. "No," she said. "We look at it wrong." And before either of them could question that, she moved. Straight toward it. Darren cursed under his breath and followed. "Lena." Darren called after her. "Don't focus," she snapped. The pressure spiked. The figure sharpened then faltered because Lena wasn't trying to define it anymore. She let her vision blur. Let her mind refuse the details. Refused the instinct to make sense of it. And suddenly it struggled. Not violently but fundamentally. Like something losing the rules it depended on. Darren caught on. "Don't finish it," he muttered to himself. His gaze softened. Unfocused. The shape between them destabilized further. Graham stayed back watching because this part he couldn't help with. This part was theirs. Lena stepped closer still. Right to the edge of where it should have been solid. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't get to exist like this," she said. She wasn't defiant or angry. She was final. The space collapsed. Not with sound. Not with force. But with absence. Like something unfinished being left that way. The pressure vanished and the clearing went completely still. Lena staggered back slightly. Darren caught himself beside her. Both of them breathing hard. Graham stepped forward slowly. "That's never been done before," he said. Lena let out a shaky breath. "They kept trying to fix it," she said. "We just stopped helping it." Darren let out a weak laugh. "I like that better." The disturbed ground in Exeter looked smaller now. Quieter. Just earth again. Whatever had been building wasn't gone. Not entirely. But it wasn't finishing either. And maybe that was enough. Chapter 15. The space that stayed empty. 3 days later, the town of Exeter felt normal. Not peaceful. Not safe. Just uninterested. Like whatever had been paying attention wasn't anymore. Lena stood near the edge of the same clearing. Not stepping into it this time. Just watching. The disturbed ground had settled. Rain had softened the edges. Leaves had begun reclaiming it. If you didn't know what had happened there, you wouldn't look twice. That was the point. Behind her, Darren shifted slightly. "You know," he said, "I can actually breathe again." Lena glanced back at him. And for the first time since she'd met him, he looked like himself. Color back in his face. Shoulders no longer pulled tight with invisible weight. "Oh, like actually breathe?" she asked. Darren nodded, almost smiling. "Yeah," he said. "Like my chest isn't empty." The word hung there. Lena didn't comment on it. Didn't need to. Because she understood exactly what he meant. Graham stood a little further back, hands in his coat pockets, watching both of them and watching the clearing. "It's still there," he said quietly. Lena didn't look at him. "I know," she said. "But it's not building anymore." Graham nodded once. "No," he said. "Not here." That pulled Lena's eyes away from the clearing. "You think it can start again?" she asked. Graham didn't answer right away because of course it could. Processes didn't end. They stopped. And somewhere, eventually, they tried again. Darren exhaled slowly. "Then we'll know what to do," he said. Lena glanced at him. He gave a small shrug. "Don't look at it right," he added. That earned the faintest smile from her. "Yeah," she said. The three of them stood there a moment longer. Then, without ceremony, they turned and walked away. And the clearing stayed quiet. But later, long after they were gone, a shift passed through the trees. Subtle. Almost nothing. And deep in the center of the undisturbed earth, something didn't move. But the space it would have needed remained. Maybe the people of Exeter were never fighting a vampire. Maybe they were fighting something far stranger. Not a creature. Not a ghost. But a space in human fear waiting to be filled. In 1892 they tried to destroy it by burning a heart. More than a century later, Lena and Darren discovered the truth. Some things survive because we keep giving them shape. And maybe the only way to stop certain horrors is to refuse to finish them. But even now, deep in the woods outside Exeter, the clearing still remains. Quiet. Empty. Waiting. And if you stare long enough into the dark spaces between the trees, you may start noticing a shape that was never fully there to begin with. Sleep carefully tonight. And make sure you subscribe for the next Whispers in the Weird.